Welcome to another Perspectives podcast, Mr. Chase. We're back. How you doing, sir?
I am doing good, man.
Yeah.
I thankfully had the day off today.
Oh, that must be
Wednesday,
nice.
took the day off, take
Yeah.
care of some doctor's appointments.
Yeah.
All that human maintenance.
That's
stuff.
always nice.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
How are you, dude?
I'm good, man. I hear it's ice is starting to come down a little bit. Everyone's freaking out, so we
Like
have to
my
figure
mom
out
in
what
the
to
next
do.
room.
Yeah, that was really funny. I didn't know what she said. I was like, "What? What happened?" But man, yeah, as you guys always know, every single time we come on the podcast, we always have a special guest, and today we have the man himself. He's wearing a white sweater. It's a sweater, right?
Gildan hoodie.
Gildan hoodie.
Buys about 10 of them every winter, he said.
Okay, that's important.
Facts.
That's serious. We have Mr. Jordy himself. I didn't get your last name, man. What is?
Hornbuckle.
Jordan
Hornbuckle.
Hornbuckle.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
Buckle for short.
Yes, sir.
that's
Dude.
that's what they call you in the streets, pretty much. Yeah,
Young Buck.
Young
Yeah.
Buck. That's a
Nah,
good
so-
name, actually.
Not in high school.
Yeah.
In high school, Young Buck.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Back to those Colleyville Heritage days.
Back in the day, Throwback Thursday.
Ooh, I
know
heard you and
Wednesday.
Chase went to school together. Is that true?
We did.
Yeah.
I played running back. Chase was one of the boys on the line. So
Hey, man. Chubby Chase did.
We got
So-
Slim Chase now, so it's a
Yeah.
different story.
my life was in Chase's hands and a
Yeah.
couple other guys. And you know,
I mean, you're here, so Chase
yeah,
must
they
have been
did.
trustworthy.
Hey, they did good. I never got injured. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but I was a scat back, so I didn't really follow the blocks.
It happens.
True that. True that.
Yeah.
But no, it was a good time. Played lacrosse for a little bit together
Lacrosse,
as well.
man. 3 years.
And so Roland, who we had on the podcast, probably almost like 10 episodes
Yeah.
ago now.
Teammate.
We got to play with Roland. So that was a good time.
Yeah.
Being able to know Jordan
Boys a
all
beast.
throughout high school. Dude, Roland is
Roland
insane.
was unreal.
But he's awesome. And so, yeah, it's been awesome being able to know Jordan for a while.
Yeah.
But yeah, man. And so, yeah, so kind of before we get into the podcast, just kind of going over your story, giving you an opportunity to share it.
Yeah.
And us learn from it.
Yeah.
One of the things that like we all kind of wanted to talk about just for a little bit, because like we'd be remiss if we didn't bring it up on the podcast, is just take a moment just to kind of talk about Kobe.
Yeah.
Kobe Bryant a little bit. It's been about a week and a half,
Yeah.
like 9 days or so
Wild.
ever since he
Yeah.
passed, which is still crazy.
Yeah.
And,
It really is.
And
yeah.
I know like for me, like it's definitely been like the most surreal and like hard hitting like celebrity death that's going to
Facts.
happen like in our life.
Facts.
And the fact that it's been 9 days and like they're still talking about it on ESPN,
Yeah.
on YouTube, on everything like that. And so, you know, he was an iconic person. He was an athlete. He was a father. He was a
Yeah.
creator, like just this amazing human. And so, Jordan, we'll start with you, like,
Yeah.
and Josue, we can go to you
Yeah.
afterwards. Like, just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on him, like, how it hit you, why you connected with Kobe, and just kind of like what your reaction was
Yeah.
to it.
Well, man, it hit me weird. Like we just left church. My brother called me, told me.
Yeah.
Then I had to go into work,
Ooh.
which is super challenging. So like I had to put on like the smiley face.
Yeah.
Act like it didn't hit me super hard. But I don't know. I think reflecting on like Kobe Bryant's life as a young kid, I just remember like the first person that I ever was able to look to and see as like an actual champion was probably Kobe.
Yep.
You know, young enough to remember the championships, young enough to remember all the like the wild moments that he had. Yeah, it hit different just because you looked up to him as a player, as a leader, and I think now that he was out of the league for a while as a father,
Yeah.
you know, as a creative as well. But I think, yeah, it hit me really hard, and I don't think it really set in until I got home, and I'm a big crier, so like
Yeah.
it's strange for me sometimes, I think, to find tears for people I don't know, which is real. I think everybody
Yeah.
deals with that.
Yeah.
But I remember hugging my mom on Sunday and actually just like crying, crying super hard. And it wasn't necessarily the fact that I was like, oh, Mom, we knew Kobe, but it was the fact that it reminded me in that moment how important family is and how important it is to text people you love and how important it is to to call your friends and check up on people that you care about.
Yeah.
You know, the fact that, you know, Gigi was on the plane as well, and the other girls and other families, but, you know, which our prayers go out to them still.
Yeah. Amen.
It hurt different because it's just a reminder how important like family is and how important your loved ones are. And so,
Agreed.
man, I texted my brother the next day and was like, "Yo, bro, I love you." And he's like, "Yo, why'd you text me that?" And I was like,
That's how my family is, man.
and I was like, "Nah, man, I'm just thinking about this Kobe stuff, and I just want you to know that I care for you and I love you."
Yeah, man.
And so like it shook me, you know, on that level of like Kobe is a hero to me, but it also shook me on that level of like, man, like I'm thankful for my family and like every moment I get with them. So it was, it hit different, man. It was just it was wild.
Yeah.
That's kind of my take from it.
Man, for me, I was at the gym. You know, I got back from church. I went to the gym real quick. I was having a good day because that's the day we went to do outreach downtown.
At West End, yeah.
Had some great moments there and experiences. So I was excited that day.
Yeah.
Got to the gym, and I have a couple group messages with some friends, and the group messages kept going. So I'm trying to ignore it. You know, I'm trying to be at the gym.
Yeah.
And I slightly saw one of the heading, and it was like breaking news that somebody posted, and someone else said, "OMG, I can't believe that just happened." So I have a small group, so I'm thinking, shout out to JOT. So I'm thinking something bad happened to someone from my small group, you know. So because both of my group messages are texting me back and forth, and so I'm like, okay, let me check, and I get on, and it says, "R.I.P. Kobe Bryant." I'm like, who's Kobe Bryant? Right? Because it didn't even register in my mind that they were talking about Kobe
like
B.
Kobe.
Bryant. Yeah, and I was like, wait, this is a joke. And so I went to Twitter, like most people do.
True.
And I got on Twitter, and he was trending. I'm like, wait, there's no way. And man, the news just kept coming. I literally sat at the gym for an hour. I didn't know what I was doing there. Like, I lost motive to work out or anything. I just sat there. And kind of speaking about him as a person, growing up, I was a LeBron fan, you know, so Kobe was always my rival because, you know, he was LeBron's rival in a sense, right?
Yeah.
And so I appreciated him from afar. It wasn't until when he was about to retire that I was like, man, Kobe was a dog. And I really
Savage, man.
found an appreciation for him.
Yeah.
And kind of like what Jordan mentioned, seeing him as a father and just being creative and everything he was doing afterwards, I had so much admiration for him.
Yeah.
You know, and just the way he was able to communicate and just the drive and the passion that he had. And so I had listened to a Kobe interview like last week, and I was like, man, this guy's so cool.
Brilliant, man.
You know, and that happened, and so that hit me. And yeah, like you said, our hearts are still out with the other families as well that were impacted. Because whenever the news came down with his daughter as well, I didn't know what to think.
Yeah.
I literally just sat there.
The day got worse.
Yeah, it felt like it progressively just got worse. I didn't know what to think, didn't know how to feel, and first it was 5 people, then it was 9 people. I was like, you know what, I'm done. Like,
You said Rick Fox was on there.
Yeah.
That made me so happy.
yeah, and
Glory.
yeah,
Yeah, and I can definitely relate to that, like in terms of just being in a funk, like that whole day, and on it, and like for me, like that whole next day, like that Monday as well, it was something where it was just different. Where pretty much all last week I was watching like almost nothing but Kobe reaction videos, Kobe remembrance videos, just and then old interviews of him, because for me, like kind of similar to you, Josue, like I was never really a Kobe fan. And really for me, like I never really watched too much basketball until like the 2006 finals, like Dirk versus the Heat. And then after that. And so I remember like the last couple finals against Boston and everything like that. But whenever I really started to grow in admiration and appreciation of Kobe was in his like farewell year and in his retirement
that
year.
final game, man.
That final game was 60. Like I still have a Snapchat of that whenever he hit 50.
Yeah.
And I screamed like in my room, like in college, because one of the reasons why it hit me so much was like, and why that season of Kobe hit me so much was that was the same year that I was getting done playing lacrosse up at UNT. And so for me, going through that season of transition from athlete life to post athletic life was like being able to see him do that was a key thing for me. Because like my last lacrosse game was April 13th, 2016. His like basketball game was April 16th, 2016.
Wow.
All happened within the same week. And so for me, being able to see him use his athletic career as almost like a launch pad
Yeah.
into like the rest of his life, and using all of the following experience resources that he acquired during that time of athletics to be able to then build on top of that was just amazing to me. And something I always remember is in his interview after the game, one of the journalists asked, "So Kobe, now that you're retired now, like what are you gonna be doing tomorrow morning? Like you gonna enjoy some pancakes with the fam? Like
Yeah.
what are you doing?" He's like, "No, I'm gonna wake up at 5:30 to go work out."
Yeah.
And everyone just kind of sits there stunned, and they're just like why do you do that? And he's like, "Well, tomorrow sets the tempo for the rest of my life."
Yeah.
And I, like, y'all know the Mamba mentality. Like, I can't let up right
man.
now.
Yeah.
It's something where I need to continue going, and this competitiveness, this like desire to reach your full potential
Yeah.
still needs to be there. And it was just crazy because like kind of as y'all, like it made me really reevaluate a lot in terms of like what matters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I think as I've talked about some on here, like, I mean, we have like a full-time job. Obviously, a lot of time goes into perspectives as a nonprofit, planning all the trips, planning everything. Time goes into this podcast, like the project that we're working on with some of the like music artists, like just everything. And so I'm just like, you know, do these things really matter? Or like, should I spend more time
Yeah.
on the relationships in my life? And then one of the things that hit me a couple days ago was I'm thinking about getting a house sometime this year. And so I'm trying to explore like creativity a little bit more.
That's live.
So it's so legit. And so I wanna really fill that house with like art and whatnot.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's kind of like, all right, like I really want to remember this, like everything with Kobe, and like continue that kind of, as LeBron said, like continue that legacy.
Yeah.
And so for me, like I've been thinking like, what's some art that I could get that can like symbolize
Yeah.
some of these things that God's had me like think through over these last few days. And one of them that I keep getting drawn back to is, and I think maybe y'all will be able to picture it, is like Kobe sitting in the shower after winning his first championship with the Larry O'Brien trophy in his hands, with the jacket, with the mean mug, just like kind of staring down.
Yeah.
It's the hoodie right there.
Yeah. And kind of he's been asked about like, why weren't you happy? Like, why were you sad in that picture? Everything like that. And he goes back, and what he says is like me and my parents weren't good at the time. Because like that was after all of his like all the stuff with like his parents went down. They didn't like Vanessa, like all of that. And so for me, it kind of makes me reflect on just like, hey, like even if I have all of this worldly success, like after I get it, I'm just gonna be like that. And so it can kind of remind me like chase what matters. But so
I mean, that following Monday, because I listen to sports stuff like all the time at work. It helps me get through the day. And one of the guys this was on national TV. Are you guys familiar with Chris Broussard?
oh yeah.
Yeah.
He broke down.
Yeah, he did. And there was another guy that, so Chris came on the show with the other guy. And so, because Chris is a believer.
Yeah.
And so the other guy, like, he was very emotional. And he was like, you know, in these moments, it makes me just really, kind of like what you're talking about, really evaluate what's important. And I see someone like Chris, and I know he's a man of faith. And honestly, you know, I can't say that I'm a man of faith, but in this moment, it made me really sit back and reach out to him and be like, man, like, tell me about this faith.
Yeah.
Like, I heard this man say that on national TV, and I was shocked.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, wow, did he really just say that? And so just throughout the day, just hearing different people say so many different things because of one man's legacy, and everybody just wanting to adopt this Mamba mentality, this mentality of really wanting to be successful in what you're doing. you know, and kind of what Chase said, it really brought a lot of people to a place of prioritizing, you know, whether that's family or whatever it might be in your life, really learning how to prioritize what's really important from everything else, you know. So, and I saw this thing on Facebook. It was like, this dude was like, if you've already been late to work 3 times this week, you don't have mama mentality. That made me laugh so bad.
Dang.
Oh man, yeah,
That's real.
Yeah, that was hilarious.
That's real.
Yeah, that was. And then my friend, she's from Cameroon, and she told that to her mom. They were like in a group message, and she was like, "Yes, mom, I just have this mama mentality now." And then so African parents are just crazy, and so her mom was like, "You have what? You mean the poisonous snake that bit me when I was 17?" And she went crazy. She's like, "I need you to explain this thing to me." I was rolling because I could imagine an African parent just responding to that. Yeah, that was so funny to me.
Oh my gosh.
That's funny.
So good.
But yeah, I mean, so just having Jordan here. Before we got on, I know you really mentioned just kind of really being vulnerable when it comes to sharing your story. So I mean, what was your story? You know?
Yeah. I try to give like the Spark Notes version.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Dude, however deep you want to go.
Yeah.
Definitely. It's open, man.
Yeah. So like, grew up in Colleyville, Texas, and my parents were pastors at a church in Arlington in the early 90s. So I'm a PK. So for other PKs listening, shout out to us.
To PKs. Yes,
Reckless, crazy, all of the above.
Yep.
There's some golden ones out there, but, you know, I'm the opposite. Yeah. But, you know. So, yeah, parents launched up a church in the early 90s. And the church actually, it did pretty well. I'd probably say by like 2001, 2002, the church had started on a lawn, moved to like a decent sized building, and then we ended up buying like this massive building that's could seat at least 1,200.
So good
on average per service. So kind of in the time where like mega churches were just starting to become like that was the saying, if your church was bigger than like 1,000, you had a mega church. So it's like, you know, the attention kind of, you know, every eye in the city kind of turns to this, you know, this young church. My dad's a super young pastor, and my mom as well. And so we're building up the city of Arlington. And man, my parents are awesome, man. My dad was a phenomenal father and a phenomenal pastor, probably one of the best communicators to this day that I've ever heard, and also one of the best pastors. And having my mom alongside him as the first lady, she was a gun, having women's conferences and like really giving back to the women in the city. So it was just this beautiful picture that was painted of, man, this young couple building church, and at the same time a young black couple in the early 2000s building this church. So like people were drawn to, and at times you can say like this is the wrong thing to be drawn to, but they were really drawn to the fact of who they were, not what they did. You know, and that's regular in church. It happens all the time.
But that's good.
You know, sometimes it can end up having people idolize, you know, pastors and people in leadership. But yeah, my father, like I said, phenomenal father, great pastor, but his character didn't really line up with, you know, where we were and where he was headed as a pastor, and had a pretty big moral fail. And so dad has this moral fail. The church goes from 2,000 to 200 overnight. My dad goes to jail. And in this time, my mom actually steps up and says, hey, I'm going to senior pastor the church until this passes over. Never did. He was actually guilty of what he was accused of. And dad actually ended up going to prison when I was 9, and he's been there ever since. So in this time period, this is when I'm like 10. So I have no idea what's happening. My older brother and sister are pretty aware because they're in middle school. And so I'm just like, yo, dad isn't around. My friends are leaving church. Media is chasing my mom. And so life kind of went from being super like dope, you know, like vacations in like Bahamas and in Mexico and like, you know, being a spoiled little kid to being like, yo, like I'm starting to recognize that things are changing. And like the wild thing was that we were so well protected by my mom and by the people surrounding us. The school that I was at, I went to Faith Christian in Grapevine, and they did a good job of protecting me as well. Like I said that to one of my teachers the other day. I visited, and I was like, yo, y'all did such a good job of guarding us and making sure that we were okay.
So good.
And so I'm forever grateful for those people that stepped up and stepped in. But yeah, growing up, like I didn't have to deal with a lot of the issues with my family, my father issues that was, believe it or not, was actually affecting my relationship with Jesus. I had no idea.
Yeah.
I'll kind of get to that later in the story. But yeah, played football. Football was an outlet for me. So like football was kind of the release.
Yeah.
My dad coached me in football up to 6th grade. So I struggled 6th grade through 8th grade to get into the rhythm of the game because my dad wasn't there. But by the time I got to high school, things kind of panned out. So high school comes along, you know, Chase knew me in high school. And I wasn't too crazy. I was just ADHD and goofy and wanted to play football and play Halo. Man, high school was smooth. Believe it or not, high school was probably one of the easiest times in my life. And I think because, once again, the supporting cast that just surrounded us. Football coaches, teammates, guys like Chase, people that made life in that moment like really, really worth living, where you didn't have to look at, you know, the problems or the issues at home. We were at school 90% of the time.
I mean, like Ryan Birchfield, like
the boys.
And that's something I've been continually reminded of is like the good community and friends that we had around.
Man,
like,
it was wild. We were crazy blessed. Like
man.
Chase's mom was literally saying like how awesome our class was. Really awesome people. And so, you know, school, ironically, and it doesn't feel like this for everybody, but I think for me at least, it kind of felt like home. A place where I could get away. And, you know, and home was always a peaceful place. My mom preached so much and traveled a lot, and my brothers and sisters were around, and, you know, my auntie pretty much stayed with us. So like we were blessed in the house and still like going to church, still covered in prayer. A lot of families still leaned in and like took care of us. So like home was safe. Home was a great place to be. But school just felt, there's something about being in the locker room or being in class for me that was like, yo, I can just come here and kind of be goofy and not really care. Graduated, played 1 semester of football at Hardin Simmons, and I broke my ankle, like my first game. And it's funny because I always look back and tell people, I'm like, I'm so grateful that God broke my ankle. And like, you know, God didn't actually break my ankle, but I'm thankful that I broke my ankle because it allowed this journey to begin where I was actually getting closer with Jesus. And it started in that moment. So break my ankle, go to community college. I pretty much dropped out of community college because I wasn't studying. Took a semester off, came back. And this is pretty wild in the story. And Chase knows this guy, but I bumped into a friend at TCC in a sociology class. Ryan Martinez. The boy, shout out to Ryan. That's the boy. But Ryan was in class with me, and I was like, yo, bro, like, dog, it's been like 3 years. Like, what you doing, bro? And he was like, I pastor at a church at Heartland Church. I think in Carrollton.
Carrollton.
Yeah. And he was like, yeah, so I'm a pastor there. And I was like, what, bro, you're a pastor? Like, I would have never guessed. Ironically, Ryan was pastoring when we were seniors in high school. He was just scared to tell anyone. So he was super quiet. But he was a youth pastor our senior year. I think that's correct, Ryan. If I'm wrong, just text me. But so Ryan's in the class. Ryan actually stopped coming to class, and I'm just like, oh, maybe he dropped out. Maybe the workload was too much. Well, Ryan actually ended up almost dying. Got a really rare disease. And, man, it was a pretty crazy time. And he actually ended up beating the odds, which were actually like, I think it was like 2%, 10%, something small of people that had this certain disease actually would make it through. So like the other 90% ended up dying from that disease. So Ryan actually ended up getting better. And around the time when he got better finally, he actually ended up calling me and he was like, yo, bro, like, I'm feeling better. I'm preaching again. I want you to come to church. Well, this is like the darkest season of my life. And, I was struggling with alcohol, just having a lot of sex and just being really wild and ruthless and reckless. And I just remember Ryan reaching out to me and being like, yo, bro, like, come through and just hang out with the youth group. He was a youth pastor at the time. So like, I'd be like, yeah, man, that sounds cool, but I'm not going to come through. And then literally like,
No,
this dude would text me and I'd be like drunk at like Billy Bob's or something, or like at Lone Star Park, like wilding out.
Yeah.
And I remember one Sunday, man, and to this day, I don't remember why I decided to go to church. But he texted me and I was like, yeah, I'm going to go. So like, I'm getting ready for church and then I'm like, I ain't got nothing to wear. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, bro, the things that were going through my head, I'm like, I'm not going to go because like, I feel like my swag ain't right. It's like my first time.
And then you being a PK, like, I'm sure you had to get dressed up back then. So.
but the wild thing was that, I don't know, I like wanted to look fresh or something for like youth group. Like, bro, come on now. I'm like 20, no one cares how I look. Yeah. So like I rock up actually a little bit late. So like sneak in the back of the youth ministry. And I think I made it for like one worship song. I wasn't really like raising my hands or anything. At this point in time, my relationship with God wasn't, I guess at that time I didn't really have one.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was just kind of neutral. I would go to church on Sundays with my mom, dip the second service was over, and then go do my thing. And that was just kind of my lifestyle. But I remember this service with Ryan. I don't even remember what he talked about, but it was March 6th, 2014. And I remember, man, just giving my life to Christ. And I remember that night I got baptized in the Holy Spirit. And like from that moment on, God completely shifted my life and completely like put me on this track and this path that I had no idea that I was even headed on. Yeah. And used Ryan as an instrument, as a brother, as a mentor to just love on me.
Yeah.
You know, he kind of discipled me and took me on this journey. And so anywhere Ryan went, I went. If Ryan picked up a chair to move the chair, I'm moving 10 chairs. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I just wanted to be around Ryan because he loved me regardless of how crazy I was in that season or what my past looked like.
Yep.
And so fast forward to 2015, you know, I did this year of leadership with Ryan. We had just had a youth conference at Heartland. And I don't know, man, I got kind of passionate about youth and about church at that time. So I was like, yo, Mom, hey, can we put on like a youth conference? And she's like, what? That's like super random. And I'm like, yeah, like Ryan and them did it. So like,
why not?
We can do it. So man, I put together a team of the people that we had through this youth conference. 80 kids rock up. Ryan actually preached there.
So good.
With my buddy, Byron Redu. And yeah, man, it was wild. But at the conference, this kid comes into the church, and he was bringing a gift for my mom from his mom. Kid named London George. You know London?
Bro.
You know London.
Yes. I miss that dude.
Yeah. London's like...
love that dude.
Travel man, bro. He is...
Yeah. I mean...
everywhere.
Like, to kind of summarize London George, he's a dude who would work here for a few months, and then literally...
New Zealand.
That was literally what I was bringing up. Would tell us, hey, in 2 weeks I'm going to move to New Zealand. And we're like, what are you going to do there? He's like, I mean, I have like a place to stay the first night, but I'm just going to kind of like just go from there.
House hopping, man.
Like free spirit, just like trusting, wild, all that.
And so London walks into our church, and he stayed a little bit for like, I think one of the services or something.
Yeah.
And he walks up to me after, and he's like, yo, bro, like, I heard you want to do ministry. Like, that's really dope. You should check out Hillsong. Bro, I had no idea in the world what Hillsong was. Like, at all. Yeah. Like, being a PK for all that time, I had no idea what Hillsong was. The church, the music, none of it. And so I remember walking up to my mom and being like, hey, Mom, can I go to Hillsong? And, like, I remember her response just being like, yeah. Tell me what to do and we'll sign you up.
So cool.
And it was funny because I wanted to go to Arkansas and go to school. I thought about playing football again at a JUCO, and I was going to go to Kings. So, like, I had these other three options that my mom was actually not feeling.
Yeah.
And the second I said Hillsong, which was in Australia, she's like, yeah.
She just had that piece.
I'm going to sign you up, like, instant. And so, like, time goes by, and I'm 6 months later, I'm in Sydney. So I jump on a plane. Yeah. And once again, I didn't do any of the application for school.
Yeah.
I lied on most applications, so if anyone's listening to this, that's not any new news. Like, that's old news. I'm gonna be honest. Like, yeah, just jumped on a plane and, you know, got accepted and went to Sydney. And not knowing it was a leadership college, just knowing that I think it's a Bible college.
Yep.
But yeah, I jumped on a plane, went to Sydney, and then I arrived and like instantly like my life began to change. I remember my first day being in Sydney, and like I'm not even exaggerating this moment, but we had landed, and we had just we landed. We went to a rugby game. The next day, we went to like a chapel service.
Yeah.
And it was a pretty moving service. After the service, I'm walking home, and I lived on top of this like hill, pretty much.
Yeah, overlooking everything. Yeah.
And so the place where I lived was called Balcom Hills. So like literally, bro, it was just like hills on top of hills. And so like this one hill like overlooks the area where I lived. And so I'm about to like descend down this hill, and I remember hearing God say, "Hey, now that I have your attention, you ready to go to work?"
Wow.
And I had no idea what that meant, but it was like God needed to take me out of my environment so that he could speak to me because of the noise and the clutter and the distractions. The second he moved me from Texas to Sydney is the first time I heard his voice and like so clear. And like I said, I remember just responding to God and being like, I don't really know what you mean by that, but because I'm here, yes. Rewind a little bit to just before I went to Sydney, I was in a place where I was super depressed and I was super anxious, and life just wasn't what I wanted it to be. I wanted to be this like football player in the league, like it's like every kid's dream.
Yeah.
But when I realized that the dream that I had kind of been like shut down, I just didn't know what to do with my life. Yeah. And so God literally sending London to the church, sending Ryan before then to love on me, and then just ending up in Sydney where God's like, hey, like, now that I have your attention, let's change some things.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I kind of went on this journey at college where God was working on my heart and surrounded me with some pretty awesome leaders that fought for me. And, but Sydney after that was just this moment in time where I fell in love with Jesus.
Yeah.
Like for the first time, like on a personal level. God sent these two women to actually mentor me during the time. I didn't trust men at the time because of everything that happened with my father.
Yeah.
And everything that happened in church. So when it came to male figures, I wasn't cool with it. Like I didn't like Pastor Brian at first. I didn't like, our principal. I didn't like a lot of the guys that were like pastoring us on like a personal level just because I didn't have any trust. So God being the good father that he is, he pays attention to detail. Just sends two amazing women into my life who, one was this 60-year-old like Australian lady, and the other one's like a 60-year-old British lady named Margaret Stunt, who was just like, bro, she's a gun.
She was just
Stunting, bro. I don't know why I never said that to this moment. Yo, gotcha. She was stunting so hard, bro. And so Margaret pastored me, and then a lady named Susan, who's actually our dean,
so cool,
also pastored me. And so these two women came into my life and just like beat me up.
Yeah. But
loved on me and made sure that I was doing the right thing and made sure that I was really building my relationship with Christ. And so like the whole journey, man, it all pointed to Christ. Like a lot of people will ask me sometimes like, yo, like, what was this on college like? Was the leadership great? Was like, what'd you learn? I'm like, man, the one thing I learned was it's all about Jesus. And like I always say that's a cliche when people are like, what'd you learn? I'm like, Jesus. That's it. Or Margaret once said to me, we were having a meeting and I was joking around with her about like, I was like, yeah, well, when I leave college, like I'm gonna leave it like a wife, like with a baddie on my arm. I'm single as heck, so that didn't happen. Yeah. But I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna leave here with like the baddest girl, you know what I'm saying? I didn't say it like that to her because she would probably slap me. Yeah. But I was like, yeah, I'm gonna have a wife when I leave. And when I get off the plane, it's gonna look, I'm gonna look cool. And she was like, how about you just get off the plane knowing Jesus more?
Oof.
And I was like, nah, man. Like, anytime I'd
seems kind of cliche.
Literally, bro. Yeah. But anytime I'd have a meeting with her, I'd walk in and feel like I'd like accomplished something. Like, oh, I'm finally ready to like make Margaret say she's proud of me. And she would just like hit me with the one-liner, and I'm like, I need to go back and pray. And like, I'm gonna fast for a month. Like, no. But she said that to me. She's like, how about when you get off the plane, when you head back to Texas, you just get off the plane knowing Jesus.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget that little quote that she gave me. And it shaped my college journey, and it shaped my life. And so when I look back at it, I'm like, man, it was nothing but getting to know Jesus, getting to know my first love.
So good. And I think that's something as far as like the return to first love.
Yeah.
Is like something that, like, just to be transparent, like hit me again, like right now, because it's something like definitely with how overwhelmed I've been over the last like couple months because of work and just like getting ready for 2020, everything we want to do. Like I've almost, like I haven't been caring of like my relationship with Jesus.
Yeah.
And it was something that like on the Alps trip, because with Gateway, I went over to the Swiss Alps, which I think we talked about before, but that was something that like really hit our whole group. One of the worship nights there, and that we've talked about on the podcast before, is just that returning to first love, and how like sometimes like for us to get the message through our stubborn brains,
Literally,
it takes us moving halfway across the world just for someone to be able to say the same words that like our mother or like our next door neighbor could. But that God shows us the care in the details and the grace to be able to do it in that way, knowing that we won't respond to it unless it's in that way. And so it's so sweet. And so kind of backtracking a little bit, going to kind of the season of you deciding to go down to Hillsong. You shared London, let you know about it. Your mom was just so at peace with it, like
instantly.
What was your mindset kind of like through that decision process and through the essentially fake application process?
Super
like,
fake.
Because I mean, I feel, and I mean, I can see this in myself, that we definitely as humans can like default to fear whenever there's like a big leap of faith that we have to make. Like for me right now, it's like, should perspectives be full-time, or should I still have my full-time job? Like that's kind of like the decision thing for me. And so I definitely see like me playing into fear a little bit. And so like for you, what was that like? Were you fearful at all? And if so, like how did you combat fear and things like that?
Man, it's wild. Because I feel like in that process of me like going off to Sydney, I was in such a place of relying on my own strength rather than God's. And so I literally got to a point where I was like, I'm just going to do nothing until I leave. And this is like the answer you don't want. But I literally was so out of options and so desperate. You know what I mean? And I feel like even with fear, like, I was scared to go. And it was kind of nerve-wracking because I was like, I don't really know what this place even looks like. And ironically, I didn't Google it. I didn't, you know what I mean? I didn't do research. I just kind of, like I said, I just went. But when it comes to being like, man, I'm so desperate, I feel like sometimes us being desperate for change can outweigh fear. And I think that was something that hit me quite hard. It's like, man, I was so desperate that I wasn't scared. I was so desperate that I couldn't think about anything else. Like I just wanted to go. And so, like I jumped on the plane and flew 17 hours, which is scary, which is weird. And, but I don't know. I think that God had his hand so like he had his hands over me so detailed, and like he was writing the script, and like even that anxiousness of being like, man, I need change. I feel like that was just God being like, hey, that's actually me encouraging you to step into something new. And so once again, we can't do things in our own strength. And so I think moments like that where I was like, God, I didn't see you in the detail, but that was actually you giving me the strength, cutting out fear, and allowing me to actually make a step to the place I'm called to be. So taking that step, I feel like it was all God. And I mean, I had friends like when I was about to head out to Sydney, they were like, yo, like say hi to Taya. Say hi to Taya. First I was like, what is a Taya? Like legit, I remember telling my friends.
Is that what they say tea down there?
I had no idea who Taya was. And so like say hi to Taya, man, we love Taya. And I'm like, I know who that is.
Yeah.
Like I knew Oceans, but I think that was like the only song that I'd known by Hillsong.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, like fear never, you know, and I wish I had a better answer for the fear part, but like I said, it was just I was so desperate for peace. I was so desperate for God. I just was like, whatever, man, I'm going.
Well, it's cool because I think something that, I don't know, maybe you want to get y'all's thoughts on this as well, because this is a thought that like kind of came to my mind when you said that is with desperation outweighing fear. I think that's something that we can kind of make the correlation to in our faith.
Yeah.
That our desperation for a savior outweighs maybe like that fear of God that kind of comes through. And because it's something that, I mean, a lot of people say, oh, you know, it's not really like fear, it's like respect and things like that. But I mean, we can clearly look at the Bible. There are times where people are terrified. When they see the Lord and when they see Christ at the transfiguration and everything like that.
Yeah.
But it's something that in faith, we know that our desperation for reconciliation with the Father far outweighs that fear that could possibly come from it. And so maybe that's something that the Father is showing you like through that experience.
I mean, because it's what our soul longs for. And so I think even that year being with Ryan and, you know, running around with his crew, you know, a lot of times I didn't know what I was doing or like what he was even preaching about because I wasn't reading my Bible at this time. And, you know, so I didn't really know much about Jesus, but I knew for a fact that my soul was longing for something more than what I was in, something more than the things I was doing.
Yeah.
And like I said, it was just like that desperation of being like, God, I need something to change because I can't keep living like the way I am.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I think that's really interesting because earlier when you were talking about, you know, how like God set you up, you know, sending you to Sydney and just all these different things.
Yeah.
As you were speaking earlier, I really kind of just felt like the Lord highlighted the length that He would go to reach, you know, His children.
Yeah.
You know, and just a verse that kind of just came to mind. You know, it says, "It's God who causes us both to will and to do according to His good pleasures."
Yeah.
Sometimes we find ourselves in places, and we just think we brought ourselves there.
Yeah.
Whereas, like God, who is like putting things in your heart, slowly. You don't see the full picture yet.
No.
And then one day you're like, oh, so that's what you were doing.
Yeah.
Right? Like you mentioned earlier, there are moments where we missed Him. But then like later on, you see what He's really doing. And me just being able to relate to your story, being a PK and moving here from the Congo back in 2002 with my family, not really knowing what was going on. You know, all I knew we were going to America. My parents from America. I'm like, what is that? Like, what are we talking about? And just coming here and just being in such because I think about it, I was like, man, if we would have never came here, what would my life be right now?
Yeah.
Wow.
Like, how would my life be right now if my parents didn't follow the Lord's lead to come here?
Yeah.
Whenever that happened, you know, and I was like, man, that's such a big thing to think about because they did that. Not only did they change our lives, but generations after that, it's changed completely because they were obedient to what the Lord wanted them to do.
Yeah.
Right.
Man,
and so, and kind of just bringing it back to you. I love the fact that, kind of just from hearing the story, God was always just sending somebody to you.
Yeah.
Right.
It's, bruh.
You know, and I love that.
It's wild.
Like my thing is like, man, I'm like, God, let me be that person that you send to people.
Yeah.
It could be just for a moment. It doesn't have to be for the longest, but just send me to somebody. Let me spark something.
Yeah.
Right? Let me sow something.
It's, bro. It's and it's wild because I've actually never like thought about that out loud. But man, it was just one person after the next.
Yeah.
You know, and it's just all God.
Yeah. So I guess my question then, kind of just seeing, because like I mentioned, you know, we kind of grew up similarly.
Yeah.
To those that are like, they grew up in the church or maybe were PK like us. And, you know, after a while, church just kind of becomes something that we do because, you know, your parents, you got to be at the church.
Yeah.
Right.
Be there on time.
Yeah. On time and all that, 2 hours earlier than you need to be. What do you say to those people? Like the ones that are just like, man, this God thing is cool. But it's not relating to me? What do you say to
Yeah.
someone like that?
Man, like as crazy as it sounds, there's like two things.
Yeah.
Like the first thing is having that relationship with Christ that isn't based off of your parents' revelation is so key. And there's nothing wrong with having your parents kind of pastor you and lead you in that light of like, hey,
So
like,
good.
man, Christ loves you. You know, we go to church, we do our thing. There's nothing wrong with that. But I do think it's really important for you to have that revelation of who Jesus is. Because, man, once that happens, it changes everything. And ironically, not ironic, that's the wrong word, but not ironically, but pretty awesome that Christ will actually use that moment to actually bring you closer to your parents. And so, like, my moment in time where I felt like I met Jesus actually ended up mending my relationship with my mom, with my brother, with my sister.
Dang.
It brought my family closer. It also allowed me to trust in him more because I'm like, okay, God, if you can do this for me, you have to be doing it for them.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, like not being afraid to branch out and figure out who Christ is for you, because it's just going to come back full circle.
Yeah.
You know? And then like the second thing is like there are PKs like me that in high school and in middle school didn't really care much for church.
Yeah.
You know, never feel pressured to like fully be in or be a part, but be attentive and lean in and trust that God is actually giving your parents wisdom and the right words to say and the right words to preach, even if you don't necessarily agree with it. But just be present. You know what I mean? You don't have to be perfect. Just be present.
So good.
And I think learning that as a young kid in high school who didn't really want to be in church, but I showed up every Sunday, and I supported my mom and I supported my siblings, and got up and spoke whenever my mom asked me to, like on Christmas and Easter and stuff like that. Like I was still a part of it, but I think there's a huge blessing for consistency in seasons where you don't even feel like you're a part of it, or seasons where you don't really feel like church is your thing. God blesses consistency, and I feel like over a long period of time, you'll begin to see the fruit that was planted from those moments of you just showing up and being consistent.
Dang.
So it doesn't mean you have to preach
Yeah.
Dang, that's
when you're 15.
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
yeah,
dude, that's so good. Cause like,
it's all about timing.
it's so, I think that's so encouraging for PKs. Cause I mean, I wasn't a PK or anything like that,
Yeah,
but just for them to know that, like, here's the thing, like the Lord is constantly pursuing you.
yeah,
Like there's not a moment where he's not pursuing you. There's
Yeah.
not a season where he's not pursuing you, even if you feel like it, feel he is or not. And so the fact of you, it being okay sometimes to, as you said, literally just be present
yeah,
rather than having to be super engaged. And then maybe even also being willing to like be vulnerable with your parents in those moments and be like,
Yeah.
hey, like, I don't really feel like speaking
yeah,
this Sunday or something like that.
yeah,
And trusting that the Lord and his perfect timing and his, as you've said, like his knowing of the details,
yeah,
that he'll be able to put those things like in order when it's time.
yeah,
And then as well, we were talking about like before the podcast, how the Lord's kind of been speaking like the importance of like consistency, like over us for perspectives in the terms of like that it's been cool to see him bless the consistency in terms of like the almost like ease that there's been in like scheduling people
yeah,
in terms of just like how he's made it all work out as long as we just put in a little bit of effort.
yeah,
But then as well, like the encouragement and support that's come from friends and things like that. Because very similarly to how like the Lord blesses consistency, like I think friends is support consistency and start to see that you're taking something seriously, see that you're being intentional about something and that you actually like care about it and things like that. And so that's so good. And so kind of going back to, you're in Australia, you're starting, I would say not starting a relationship over with the Lord, but in a way starting from square one.
Yeah, a little foundation.
Yeah, like trying to dig up those things in your past that you believe that might have been lies or things like
Yeah.
that, and planting good seeds on good soil. And
Yeah.
so what was that process like of like Andy Mineo talks about it in one of his songs, like reconstructing everything he once believed in.
Yeah.
And so what was that process like in doing that in like a new city,
Yeah.
in a new place? Because I know there's so many people out there who
Yeah.
are probably going through the same things.
Yeah, bro. That hurt. That whole process was painful.
Wow.
And it was wild because my buddy, his name is Jake. He was like mentoring me at the time. And he introduced me, I mentioned Susan earlier.
Yeah.
He introduced me to Susan. He's like, hey, man, like after hearing your story, there's someone I want you to talk to. She's a little scary, but she's the best person to have in your corner. So I emailed Susan and went and had a little sit down with her. She sits you down in this office that is like knee to knee, super tiny, and just looks you in your face and like she knows your story before you even go in. Like it's like Holy Spirit just like drops like little Easter eggs for her.
Amen.
And so like I remember like having this conversation with her and she's like, hey, tell me about this stuff with your father. And I was like, what? I didn't tell you. Like I did not tell you any information. Like I don't know. So we end up having this conversation just about my dad and about the church and about I think some of the things that I struggle with in life. And believe it or not, it was the starting point of a journey of healing. And I didn't even know. And so, a couple weeks later, had a little prayer meeting with someone on team there. And I left that meeting and I was like, man, that was like, I feel lighter. And obviously the prayer was amazing, but the journey and like the consistency and continuing to be stretched and be challenged and be pastored was the one thing that kind of changed my perspective on life. And I remember there was one week where I was talking to Margaret, the other lady, the British lady.
Yeah.
And I was roasting my mom, dude. I was like, man, I didn't like my mom, man. She didn't love us the right way. And, I felt like my friends had parents that were like around more and my mom was always preaching and teaching and, she wasn't around. And I remember Margaret she didn't say anything. She didn't really respond to it. She's like, okay, well, pray about it and let's talk in a couple weeks. And I remember waking up one morning and I can't make this up. Like I woke up like crying. And I felt so ashamed and so guilted because I had realized in this moment in time, and this was a God thing, that my mom was actually the most amazing mom I could ask for. The way she fought for us, the way she protected us, the way she led our church, the way she sent me to Sydney. I remember calling her and crying on the phone and just being like, hey, Mama, like, I love you. Like, I'm super sorry just for not believing in you and not believing that you loved me the right way. And that moment changed my relationship with my mom for the rest of my life. So like, even to this day. And I remember I went back to Margaret and I was like, man, that was like, I had this moment with God this morning and I love my mom. And she's like, I know you do. She was like, you just needed to get it out. You needed to say that you didn't so that you could actually, realize that you did. And so there are moments like that where I was pastored into, I was just pastored in these moments where my heart was hurting. I think the biggest one was, biggest revelation I had was actually with my dad. I remember John Gray came out to a men's event that we had.
So good.
And there's probably a lot of people listening that struggle with this same thing as well. But I had an issue with how I viewed God because of how I viewed my father. So I couldn't connect with my heavenly father because my relationship with my earthly father was so damaged.
Yeah.
And so anytime that a pastor would get up on stage on Father's Day or any other time and say like, hey, like, God's a good father. He loves you. He cares for you. He wants to give you good gifts. He's watching you. He's guiding your life. I didn't believe it. I didn't believe it because physically, earthly father wasn't there to do any of those things for me. And so I was like, well, why would a heavenly father do that if I can't even get that here? And so, man, I remember I was so broken. And I remember we had a men's event. And after this men's event, I left the church to walk home. And man, I remember like I was walking with my buddy and I was like, yo, man, like I feel different. He's like, what do you feel? It's like, man, I feel like a backpack was just taken off my back. And it was just this moment where John was worshiping where we were worshiping with John. And it was wild, man, just how in that moment God healed my relationship with my father. not only that, but also with my Heavenly Father.
Yeah.
And that was like in my second semester, but that moment unlocked so much spiritually and so much relationally with God, where I was actually able to have this father-son relationship with God, actually. And so like my whole first year was about sonship and about fathership.
Dang.
And man, it messed me up. But it's wild how we will take what happens here with, you know, parents, with friends, with people that have hurt us, and actually those things sometimes can hinder our relationship with God, because we view, you know, God the way we might view our father, or the way we view our mother. We view God the same way. Man, it's wild that the enemy uses that to kind of put a roadblock in the way of us getting closer to our Father. And so, yeah, like the journey of, you know, building foundation and healing while I was at college, it was really painful. And a lot of it just had to do with family. And you mentioned it earlier, but about when your family came to America, it actually set up the future generations for a win. And that's something I believe in, like so firmly, that God can take one moment of obedience from anyone in our family, from our parents, from us, from our future kids, and actually change the whole entire generic plan. Or like, you know, sometimes you can call it like a generational curse, but he can literally change the trajectory of where our family is going, and the blessing now begins to start. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like for me, there was a lot of moments where God was like, hey, the stuff that your dad dealt with, you're not going to deal with. Mm-hmm. The stuff that happened with your church is not going to deal with that. I'm going to change this and make it good.
So good.
You know what I mean? So yeah, like there are moments like that where God was just restoring things and changing things in me that look so much like my dad. And that's stuff that I fear, because me and my dad are so similar in personality. And so, like, I remember in my first year, I was literally fearful to be a pastor. I was like, I can't do this. Like, I cannot do this, because, man, there's a lot of character that I'm feeling that me and my dad share. But I remember God being like, actually, no. You're my son. Go. And so, like, it just, he was breaking things off left and right. And so, man, it was a journey, man. But as painful as it was, I always tell people this: I would not change the journey. I wouldn't change a single thing about it. The growing pains, the anxiety, some days feeling depressed because I was like, man, I'm not good enough to actually step into the shoes that I feel like God is preparing for me. I wouldn't change those moments, because those moments actually built character in me. Those moments actually gave me a fight. You know, we were talking about Kobe earlier. Those moments kind of built that Mamba mentality. Mm-hmm. Even when I was like, man, I feel the exact opposite of Mamba. Mm-hmm. I feel like a garden snake. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like man, but those moments built more character in me. And man, I feel like what my family's gone through, I can't give up. And you know what I'm saying? Like I can't just shake off what God has done and what God has brought us through. I feel like moments like that, you could be like, hey, I'm not going to do ministry. I'm not going to be around church. I'm going to go chill. I'm going to stay in Sydney and just like work at like a, you know, at a coffee shop. Yep. Options, for real. Like those were things I thought about. But no, like those moments built character. And so, yeah, man, it's like, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, and they also give you, Tony Dungy says this, they also give you like a platform of vulnerability. Yeah. To be able to encourage those who are struggling with those same things. Yeah. Because I know in my life, like some of the people who provided like the most encouragement are the people who struggled with what I was struggling with. Yeah. Like at one time. Yeah. And it's something that, like, I can't remember which book it is that he talks about, but it's something that like he encourages, like whenever he was a coach, like all of his players with, is don't be ashamed of like the journey that you've been on. Yeah. With them, whether it's sports or whether it's with the Lord or things like that. But actually, like, once you grow in enough trust in the Lord, and enough strength to be able to share that, like, be vulnerable. Yeah. And because that's something that he's given you to speak on. Yeah.
I mean, I hear your story now. I've probably shared this before in the podcast, but a lot of times for me, I feel like the Lord speaks to me just through like verses
Yeah.
to help me understand and process things,
Yeah.
right? And
like
kind of
that.
just hearing your story.
awesome.
Wait, what did you say?
I said I like that a
Oh
lot.
yeah. Kind of just hearing your story, man. I'm just thinking about reconciliation just over and over again. Because God says God was in Christ reconciling the world back to himself.
Yeah.
And what I've seen in my own life, in my own story, was whenever God changed me, then he started reconciling things. Man, what you said about whenever you come to that place of, this is for the PKs, right? Whenever you come to that place of like knowing Christ for yourself, it changed my relationship with my parents,
Yeah.
and it gave me such an appreciation that I didn't have before,
Yeah.
right? Because whenever you said, I was just shaking my head like, man, because I mean that's so true, because we go through life, as PKs, and there's this expectation for you to be a certain way, to be perfect, to be, people just look at you a certain way because
Yeah.
your parents, and almost like you got to be a pastor too for whatever reason,
Yeah.
right? And all the prophetic people just want to prophesy that you're
Lord
gonna be
have mercy.
that you're gonna be that you're gonna be a pastor because that's the easiest thing to do to a PK,
man.
right? And
Every
so, but man, yeah, it's like I love that God reconciles, because God's about family, right? And he's in the business of reconciling families, even in moments where we see how the enemy likes coming and destroying things, especially when we're young and we
Yeah.
don't understand what's going on. By the time we grow up, we're like, oh, I can't trust. I can't have a father figure. I can't trust authority,
Yeah.
because I've been scarred by it when I was younger.
Yeah.
And I can't trust my mom or whatever. I've been scarred by her when I was younger. And then so it's like, and God, I don't really know if I can trust you. You weren't there for me.
Yeah.
Right. So that's kind of the enemy's plot. His tactic is like, oh, I'm gonna get you while you're young, right? So you can grow up that way. So whenever somebody says God's a good father, you're like, I don't think so, because there's a long list of reasons why
Yeah.
God is not good in your mind.
And it's almost like subconscious in a way.
Yeah.
Because it's something that like the reasoning for why you believe that subtle theme
Yeah.
isn't just obvious or right there. And that's why I think, just wondering, did you go out? So you had Susan and Margaret
Susan and Margaret.
as counselors,
Yep.
or were they counselors or were they mentors?
All the above.
Okay. So
Moms away from home.
Yeah.
So them, we could say those are counselors. Did you do any sort of like actual in office or like face-to-face counseling with anyone outside of that?
I did. Yeah.
So that's one of the things I was going to say was like
yeah, it's huge.
the importance of sitting down with
And processing it.
people to process it
Yes.
to be able to dig up those little roots. Because that's
Yeah.
something that like I've been wanting to do for a while, and that I've actually like reached out to some friends.
Yes.
I think Josue, I think you might know her, Kristen, who I went on the Alps trip with. I've talked about having her on the podcast before, but she's a licensed counselor.
Yeah.
And it's something where I've been through some like trust things, relationship things, like other things than that like I can see affect my relationships with other people and my relationships with the Lord, that
Yeah.
I know through people like Andy Mineo.
Yeah.
And hearing him talk about it, like sitting down and having counseling with people
Yeah.
is so good, because then they're able to analyze it from like an outside spiritual perspective and are able to help you dig a little bit, understand like what the F happened
Right.
that caused this subtle lie that you didn't even know was there.
Yeah.
And so,
I would love to share on that actually.
dude, yeah, open mic, man.
Yeah. So the cool thing about Hillsong College was that those kind of things in regard to counseling and psychologists we had access to, and all you had to do was ask.
So good.
And so the challenging thing was I don't speak on the behalf of everyone, but a lot of my friends wouldn't do it
Yeah.
because they were so afraid of like being exposed, or I guess exposing themselves in front of God out loud with another person in the room, which is scary, because here you are sitting across from someone who's, obviously paid, and you're about to share every detail with them, like everything, like nothing, like everything is on the table. Mm-hmm. And so, I had moments when I was with Susan where obviously like everything was on the table, everything I've done, everything I've struggled with. you know, the family stuff, all of it's present. But even then, Susan was wise enough to be like, hey, like, I actually want you to go see a clinical psychologist. So I actually had to go. I actually had to go because she made me do it. But I went and saw a clinical psychologist. And it went from like she made me do it to like, I'm so glad I did it.
Amen.
And so I remember the first session, I sat down with this lady. And like one thing that grinds my gears is when like someone pulls out a pen and they just start like taking notes, and you're like, oh man, they're writing down my whole entire life. Like, where's this document going? Yeah. And most of that stuff is very private. And before you even start a session, they're gonna say, hey, like all this is disclosed information. We won't be sharing this with anyone, just you and me. And so like that's a good feeling. But I remember sitting down with this lady, and you know, we start going through the process of getting the story on the table. And I remember her just taking her pen and she put it away. Put away the notebook, put away the pen, and she's like, we're not going to take notes on any of this. Share. And I remember seeing her for a couple months, and man, just like the opportunity to actually speak to someone who's a professional and someone who's actually listening, and not just listening not even just because they're getting paid, but because they actually care. And like something that's really, really powerful in counseling is you could go to any counselor and have them listen and take notes. But when you go to, I think, a Christian counselor, man, there's just something different in it. I really do feel like Holy Spirit's invited into that moment and into that space. And her responses weren't just like, oh, I'm so sorry about that. I hope you feel better. It was like, no, this is what God says about you.
Amen.
And this is what he thinks about you.
Yeah, we're not just going to give you some pills. Like,
yeah, and it wasn't, there's no, you know what I'm saying? Like the medicine was the word. The medicine is Christ. The medicine is, you know what I'm saying? The Spirit. And so, man, like I remember leaving those sessions and being like, dog, I don't care how much this costs. Like this is really, really helping.
Yeah.
And yeah, I feel like afterwards, I've always been a very like expressive person. So like even talking to Susan and talking to Margaret and talking to some of my other mentors, you know, with people I trust, I'm open to. But there was something different about having that clinical psychologist actually be able to, yes, assess you, but not assess you because they're like, oh, let's pick your brain, but assessing you because, hey, we want you to be the best version of you. We want you to be a man of God. We want you to be a woman of God. We want you to be a better pastor. We want you to be a better leader, you know, a better business person, a better artist. Those opportunities and moments actually just allowed me to feel free. And so like for anyone who's like been thinking about, oh, should I go see a counselor? Yes. My encouragement is go see a Christian counselor and allow someone to speak some life over you. Yeah, it's game changing. And I really wish that a lot of my friends would have done it as well, because yeah, it costs maybe $100 per session. Like it's not that bad, but it was worth every penny. I mean, so my encouragement to people who are thinking about it is like, don't be afraid of sharing your story. Don't be afraid of saying it out loud in a room to someone. It's actually going to help you. And like I said, it being a Christian counselor, I feel like a lot of the conversation is actually going to be around what God really thinks about you and what the Word says. You know, and when we lean on that, you know, I feel like you begin to become more confident about who you are, regardless of how your past looks. If it's bad, if you think you're dirty, if you hate yourself, no, the Word actually restores you back to where you're supposed to be. And so, yeah, don't be afraid of that.
Man, that's good. Yeah, it's the fact that you said not only did you have someone to listen to you, but someone that spoke life back into you, right? I think that's an important part. 'Cause I don't just want to talk to you if you're just gonna just listen and like
and
draw
then pictures.
Draw pictures, take notes, and it has become a case. Like for me personally, it's like if I go see someone, I'm like, man, I want to leave there and you speak some life into me, right?
Yeah.
And so in my own little small way, whenever I like talk to people and they're like sharing things or whatever, man, it's such a great opportunity, right? Because the Bible says that let your words, always be filled with grace. So it brings encouragement to the hearers, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm like, oh, that's really good. And so whenever I'm speaking to somebody, I'm trying to be mindful of that, right? To where I want them, especially in those kind of settings, right?
Yeah.
I want them to leave thinking, man, like you say, I feel like I had a backpack on, and now the backpack is off,
Man.
right? Like there was a weight, because Jesus is all about that, just taking the weight off of us
light
and
yoke.
restoring us. And,
And that was every session. Like I would leave and walk home, and I just felt like, man, I can breathe.
Yeah.
And I feel like sometimes we feel suffocated by our past or by experiences or, by things that happened with our family.
Yeah.
Or things that happened when we were kids. Whenever you get a chance to actually allow Holy Spirit to heal those things, man, there's like a fresh oxygen, man. It's like, it's crazy.
Yeah. And there's something about when you dig out a deep root that's in your soul,
Yeah.
needing to fill that area with something that's good and fruitful,
Yeah.
rather than just leaving it void.
Yeah.
Because that's something that
dangerous.
maybe non-spiritual, like non-Christian counselors maybe like may tend to do, is just saying, oh, hey, we dug up and we understand like
I mean, you'll feel better.
why you think this way, and you'll feel better. But then from there, like where are you gonna run?
Yeah.
Are you gonna run to like alcohol? Are you gonna run to like another source of addiction? Like to fill like that hole that's like now there. But if you're able to fill it at the same time that you're digging it out, is like so good.
Yeah.
And so awesome. So I know one of the other things that you kind of talked about before the podcast that you wanted to cover, like whether your experience or like any sort of advice you think you can give, is after Australia.
Yeah.
You moved back here. What year did you move back here?
2018.
It was 2018.
July 2018.
Yeah. And so kind of talk through what that experience was like.
Yeah.
However in depth you want to. And then as well, just kind of talk about any advice or anything like that that you would give to people who are like returning home after like a life transformational like experience like that. Because that could be a mission trip. That could be seminary in a foreign country for years. Like, so yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to backtrack to like 2017 to like a crucial moment, and then we're kind of just going to move from there. We'll fast forward. But I know something that's really important is, I don't know, I guess not being fearful of like new life or like a new journey. So like, yes, new life, new journey, not being fearful of what's next. And,
So good.
I think for me, I was super fearful, because I knew coming back, my mom and them would kind of expect me to pastor the church. And I think one of the biggest things that I had struggled with was fear of being like my dad and fear of actually stepping into a place of ministry and pastoring. But it was weird because I had no reconciliation with my father. So one thing is like, man, before you come back, like there's no checklist of how much you can like restore. God's going to do that in his timing.
Yeah.
But be open to that, to kind of digging deep so that when you come back, you don't have to, I don't have to worry about, man, I fear that I'm going to be like my father. No, God handled that before I even stepped foot on soil here in America.
So good.
And so one thing, and it kind of goes back to what we were talking about in the beginning, is not letting fear hinder you from what you're called to do.
Yeah.
Like if I'm honest, if I was going to let fear hold me back from coming back home, honestly, I would have just stayed in Sydney for another like 2 years, because why not? It's beautiful. It's fun. There's the beach. Like Hillsong Church is great, but being obedient and being like, no, I'm actually just I'm gonna come back home.
Yeah.
And so for anyone who's, wants advice on that transition, my biggest advice would be just do it. And it's just like the first statement I said, there's like that sense of being desperate. Just as desperate as I was to go to Sydney, I was just as desperate to come back. Once I knew that, okay, God, we had completed everything that we were supposed to do. And in my last year of being in Sydney, my last semester was the first time that I really felt like Jesus was like, hey, we did what we were supposed to do. You can go home. And there's like this clear voice, and there was so much confidence, I feel like, in my step and in my spirit. And like, what I'm saying? Like I wasn't afraid to go home. I wasn't afraid to pastor. I wasn't afraid to do what I felt like God was calling me to do. And so, man, my advice is, 1, don't be afraid. 2, sometimes it's better to not have a game plan. Like, don't sit down and psych yourself out, being like, okay, when I get home, I'm gonna have 17 businesses and I'm a pastor the church and I'm gonna have a girlfriend. You know what I'm saying? It's like, no, just get home and get re-immersed in the culture, re-immersed with your family, and breathe. Like, I think that's the biggest thing. It's just like, breathe, man.
Because I think kind of going to that, you had a similar mindset going out to Sydney.
Yeah.
To where you didn't have any expectations.
Not zero.
Which I think is good because then it leaves a pure ground for God to do whatever he wants to do.
Yeah.
Because if we have all these expectations, like expectations can either be of God or they can not be.
Yeah.
And it leaves the ability for that ground in our mind that we go into that environment in to not be tainted by anything.
Yeah.
And allow God to really just us be open to do what he wants to do. And so that's so good that you went to Sydney with that mindset and then was willing to return home with that same mindset rather than, I'll just return back to chilling with the same friends or things like that. So
and something that's challenging, like especially when I did get home, was actually figuring out who my friends still were stateside. A lot of things had changed. A lot of my buddies are married now. A lot of my buddies are working at jobs that required them to work 8 to 5, 24/7, and I'm just like fresh off the boat, at home, bored and like dreaming big because I just came from like this awesome trip and this awesome moment.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really important to surround yourself with the right people, and it doesn't mean when you get home you have to like text 32 mentors and be like, we got to meet up for coffee like 24/7. I gotta get this off my chest. I gotta get this off my chest, kind of stuff. But it's allowing God to immerse you back into the environment with grace, and he's gonna point out the people that need to be in your life. And like even now, it being 2 years, in July of being back home, God is actually just now bringing in new mentors into my life and new people. And I look back at it now and I'm like, God, I'm actually thankful that I went through a season of not knowing who my people were to coming into a season where I'm like, I'm starting to recognize who the circle is. I'm starting to recognize who my leaders are. Yeah. I'm starting to recognize who I need on my team. I'm starting to recognize that, my mom being my pastor for the first time and working alongside her, that, actually she's called to be another mentor in my life. So it's cool how God will open up doors relationally, but on our end, it's just going to take patience, and that can be frustrating when you're like, God, man, I want the best friends right now. Yeah. I want friends like I had in Sydney. I want friends like I had in college, or friends like you had on your mission trip, or friends like you had while you were studying abroad. Yep. It's going to take time for you to see who the people are, your people. And for some people, it's actually much easier than that. You already know because maybe something was established before. Yep. But for me, like, before I left, like, man, I literally had Ryan. That was about it. So, you know what I'm saying? It took time, and now year 2, I'm learning. These are my people, and I'm thankful that it's taken this long because this is the perfect season to have these people in my life. Yeah. And so, like, I think that's my biggest advice is just patience. Don't be afraid. Don't have crazy expectations when you come back home, and spend time with your family. And this is another huge thing. Don't come home expecting your family to act like the people where you just came from. For real. Because your family's still been here in the States doing either the same thing or something new. So don't come home expecting them to understand the culture you just came from. Yep. You know what I mean? I think I did that a little too harsh when I first came home. Like, me and my brother got into it because our egos, I'm acting like I'm this like big shot, like kid coming from like Bible college, and everything. And he's like
a tough guy.
He's a tough dude, and he's not trusting me because now I'm like trying to, step into ministry. Yeah. And so he's not trusting me. And so we bumped into it. So it's like, man, have grace for your family. Have patience with your family. And man, God will just, in the right time, I guess, like, mend things and kind of allow things to happen naturally. I feel like a lot of my friends and even myself, like, we force like our new beliefs on our family, and it can be really intense. And so, Hopefully that answered the question.
That's good.
No, it did. It did. Man, thank you for coming in and just sharing.
Yeah.
I think it's, I love how every podcast just, God has a way of just orchestrating it.
Yeah.
We kind of have an outline and then we start talking about things. Lord, this is good. Let's stick here. And man, I really just kind of really left from here, I guess, from your story and just really taking away that reconciliation, what God is able to do in terms of reconciling not just us back to him, but us with others.
Yeah.
And the importance that we get to play in other people's lives as believers.
Yeah.
Like I said, that's an encouragement for me to, to try to continue to be that person to, be there for somebody.
Yeah.
To try to, it can be, like I mentioned earlier, small ways and big ways.
Yeah.
Like taking that seriously, whenever God gives you the opportunity to really take that, because lives are being transformed, even though I might not see it the first time, right? And having grace for those people so that we're able to really build them up. So man, I really took a lot from this. So thanks for coming and sharing. Yeah.
Same here, man. And it's really cool. It is really cool for me because like it's something where kind of in between like high school, like 2012, and then going up until we really reconnected back at Mr. Short's wedding earlier last year. There was only like a couple times that we were able to catch up because we were just different seasons, everything like that. And definitely knew like you went down to Hillsong and everything like that, but didn't really know kind of like everything that God was just kind of working in your life, working in your heart during that time. And so, dude, it's really encouraging, and it was really awesome for like me to be able to just kind of catch up.
Yeah, no, man, it's an honor.
Everything's been
Seriously,
and I'm excited to see just everything moving forward. It'll be good, but we'll give you just a couple minutes for any last words of encouragement or anything that just kind of comes to mind that you want to leave with everyone.
Man, there's a really quickly. There's a verse that I've been thinking about, and it's in John, and I started reading John like this year because it's my favorite book. So cool. I typically will read John to start off the year. Yeah, and I've read it a few times, and I love how God will just highlight different things in His Word. Like even after like the 10th read, you're like, I never saw that.
Yes,
until now. And I came across it a couple of days ago, man. It wrecked me. Yeah, it was after Jesus was teaching. He's teaching on a really tough topic. He's like, you have to drink my blood and like eat my flesh, and people are like freaking out. They're like, what is this guy talking about? Yeah, all the religious people are like, we're gonna kill you because we don't like that. And so, and this is in John chapter 6, and I'm just gonna start at 66. Mm-hmm. It says, from this time, many of his disciples turned back and no longer followed him. Jesus says, you do not want to leave too, do you? He says this to his disciples. Do you want to leave as well? And Simon Peter answered him, Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life. We have come to believe and to know that you are the Holy One of God. And I think that moment of Peter saying, Lord, to whom shall we go? I feel like there's a lot of people maybe listening, or a lot of people who are in a season where, man, you've experienced God and you've experienced His love and you followed Him, and maybe it hasn't been the way you've wanted it to be. But I think Peter's response is saying, where am I going to go if I don't have God? Yeah. I feel like for a lot of people listening, I kind of want you to say that to yourself, like, Lord, where am I going to go? Because God has brought a lot of you forward and not backwards. Continue to go forward. Continue to stay close to God. The disciples literally went from being fishermen to being tax collectors to actually walking with Jesus. And at this moment when everyone's starting to leave, one of the disciples just has a revelation of like, man, where am I going to go? And in my own personal life, I'm at a point where I'm like, God, I cannot go anywhere else but where you're going. Yeah. Like, I've seen too much. I've experienced too much. You've brought my family out of too much for me to say, you know what, actually, God, all this was cool, but I'm going to stop. Yeah. Like, I can't stop. You know what I mean? Like, God literally invades my thoughts 24/7. Jesus is like the only thing that's on my mind growing the church is like the one thing that I want to do. Pastoring people is like, that's my passion.
So good.
And so, I don't know, I feel like for someone hearing that verse of being like, man, where am I going to go? I don't know what else to do. My encouragement to you is to stay the path, regardless of how you're feeling. If you're feeling perfect, if you're feeling like you've messed up yesterday, don't give up today. Yeah. Keep going. Keep moving forward. Keep staying close to Jesus. Because when we stay close to Jesus, we learn from him. We learn his rhythms of grace. We learn who he is. We learn his character. And that changes our life. So, yeah, remain close to him. And, man, even before this podcast, that was like the one thing that was on my heart that I was like, man, I really hope I get to share that. And so I hope that blesses someone who's listening, just to be reminded to remain in his love, to remain close to him. And, man, there's no other person I would want to follow. There's no other person I'd want to be near. And so, yeah, that's my one word of encouragement.
Yeah, so good, man. And people will connect with that.
Yeah.
So just be encouraged.
Yeah.
With that, dude. Awesome, man. Well, it's great because I think this will be the longest podcast that we'll have. Which there's no one else I would have rather had it with, for sure, my dude. So grateful for your time, man.
Thank you, man.
We'll be putting all of Jordan's information down below, as well as something that we didn't really talk about beforehand. The boy's an artist.
Yes.
He's got a little album or EP technically out there.
LP. Nah, a little EP.
Out there. And so we'll go ahead and throw that in the description as well in case you want to try it out.
I appreciate you.
But yeah, and so all y'all, thank y'all so much for tuning in. Definitely hope you enjoyed it. Feel free to give us any feedback. Please subscribe, give us a rating, all of that good stuff. And so until next week, hope y'all have a great week and much love. God bless.